Welcome to Nobody Told Me. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens. The holidays are upon us, and in this episode, we'll get some expert advice on a couple of holiday issues: socializing and shopping. Well, actually, overshopping.
First, we explore socializing. This is the time of year when we may find ourselves going to parties and hoping to put our best foot forward in terms of etiquette. Jacqueline Whitmore is one of the foremost authorities on business etiquette in the world today and the author of Poised for Success: Mastering the Qualities That Distinguish Outstanding Professionals, and also the book Business Class: Etiquette Essentials for Success at Work.
We asked Jacqueline for suggestions on how to remember the names of people to whom we've just been introduced.
That's a really common conundrum with most of us. I even have challenges remembering names from time to time. So what I tell my students is when you hear a person's name, you must repeat it back to them. For example, you might say, "Hi, Jacqueline, I'm Jan." And I would say, "Very nice to meet you, Jan." Or if your name is unusual, I might say, "How do you spell that?" Or I might ask for a business card. So anytime you see a name in writing, it helps you to remember the name a little bit better. But practice makes perfect, and none of us are perfect. So we all have to practice these tactics on a daily basis. But it's really important to remember this. What's important to you, you will remember. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're out on a date and this fabulous person treats you to dinner. You're going to remember that person's name for a very long time if you like that person. And maybe if that person makes loads of mistakes, you might remember that person's name too. So it has to be one extreme or the other. But what you remember is usually what you want to remember.
All right, now what if you have forgotten someone's name and you're in a situation where you have to introduce them to someone else?
And you should know their name.
And you should know their name.
Right. Well, hopefully they'll step in and extend their hand and say their name, but that doesn't always happen. So I'm honest. I usually just say, "I'm having one of those days. Please tell me your name again. I know you just said it 2 seconds ago, but please tell me your name again. I'm having a memory lapse." And most of us can relate to that. Mm-hmm. So it's better to just be honest. Or if you're out with a friend and you're going to a big networking event, you can talk to the friend ahead of time and say, "Listen, if I don't introduce you to someone, just go ahead and extend your hand and say your name. It just means that I can't remember his name."
Right.
My husband and I do that all the time if we're going to an event. Yes, in the car beforehand.
And if you're at that event and you don't really know what to say, how can you make small talk that doesn't sound so stilted?
Well, there are 2 words that will launch scintillating conversation. Those 2 words are "tell me." Tell me, how did the 2 of you meet? Tell me, what did you enjoy most about your vacation? Tell me about that beautiful pen you're wearing. Does that have a history? When you comment about the obvious, the surroundings, the food, things that everybody can relate to, it's easier to start small talk. And there are 2 subjects that everyone can talk about: food and travel. Just remember food and travel, and you're in good shape.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Now, what about the taboo topics?
Taboo topics. Well, we've all heard of those: sex, religion, and politics, and the cost of things. However, it depends on the group you're with. So if you're in a political group, then of course you're going to be talking politics. But if you're at a family holiday dinner, politics is probably not the most pleasant conversation because you're going to get differences of opinion and it might start an argument. Although I'm always in favor of having educational dialogue with family and friends. However, I would rather steer clear of anything that might cause some controversy.
And this year especially, the subject is certain to bring up some sort of controversy at family dinners. How do we deal with people who bring it up at dinner, and how do we respond?
I think it's okay to respond to someone who brings up, let's say, a political situation at dinner, as long as it's not confrontational, as long as it doesn't get heated. I think that we can learn by listening to other people. We may not agree with that person, but if you are in a disagreement and you see that the conversation isn't going anywhere, you might just say, well, that's really interesting, Tom. I respect your opinion. However, let's just agree to disagree and change the subject.
Interesting. Well, that sounds like good advice. What other advice do you have as far as holiday get-togethers are concerned? If you're talking about a business party, for example, a end of the year holiday business party, what suggestions do you have for making that a positive experience? What to do and not to do?
Wow. Okay. So holiday business parties. I would say find out what the dress code is ahead of time. Don't just show up in something that you think might be appropriate. What I see most often in business situations is people who dress inappropriately. Maybe you're dressed appropriately, but the person you're bringing to the party is dressed inappropriately. So that's another point. Find out if you can bring a guest. Don't just automatically bring a guest, and make sure that that person represents you well. Also, when you go to these events, don't just sit in the corner and wait for people to approach you. It's everyone's responsibility to get up and mingle and meet new people. That's why you're invited. You're invited to an event, not because the host thinks you're hungry or thirsty, but because it's usually a thanks for your friendship, or the host thinks you have something to contribute. So make it a point to go to the party, even if you stay 30 minutes. I know a lot of us are busy and we don't necessarily want to go to everything, and that's fine. But remember, in business, you want to be perceived as a team player. So go to these events. Show up. I show up early because usually the VIPs and the most influential people show up early and they leave early. So if you are interested in meeting someone in particular, then show up early and ask for someone to introduce you to that person, because it carries more weight when you are brought to a person by someone like the host or hostess versus just going up to somebody cold and saying, "Hi, my name is so-and-so." So prior planning prevents poor performance. Do your homework.
What are the basics of cell phone etiquette at these events, or even out on a date or at dinner? When can you bring out your cell phone? Should you turn it on silent? What should you do?
Well, you actually can bring out your cell phone under certain conditions, and most people bring it out anyway.
Right.
And that tends to be the rude thing to do. In fact, a lot of people will bring the phone to the dinner table and put it on the table as if it's a piece of silverware. And that is not the way to handle cell phone etiquette. In fact, I always say if you can't eat it, keep it off the table. Put it on silent, and if you are expecting a very important telephone call, step away from the table and take the call in private. Or alert your guest ahead of time and say, I just wanted you to know the babysitter's keeping my 3-year-old and I might get a call. And if so, I'll just step away briefly and return the call, or just let the person know. But that's the big thing. Yell is another big faux pas. That means talking louder than you normally need to talk, or discussing private matters in public places. That's also a big no-no.
What are some of the do's and don'ts of working a room at a business party?
There are a lot of ways to work a room. And I always say the most powerful part of a room is the door, because everybody's eye is on the door. You're watching who's coming, who's going, what he's wearing, what she's wearing. And so use the door to your advantage. When you walk into a room, step off to the side of the door. When you walk into the doorway, step off to the side and pause for just a few minutes and scan the room. And this allows you to collect your thoughts and to say to yourself, who do I want to meet first? That's the biggest thing, because if you go to a networking event without a plan, then you're probably going to set yourself up for failure. So you must have a plan before you walk in and work that room. So when you walk in, you want to avoid 2 places. Avoid the bar and the buffet right away. Because most people will head for those areas. And you're there for a reason. You're not there to eat the pot stickers and the beanie weenies and drink your 6 gin and tonics. That's the other thing. Limit your alcohol consumption, because loose lips sink ships. It's okay to have a glass of wine or two, know your limits, but don't pile your plate high and drink too much. That means you might talk too much or say the wrong thing. You're really there, again, for business purposes. So a business meal is more about the business and less about the meal. The other thing I want to say is eat something before the event, because you never want to show up to an event famished, because you will head for the bar or the buffet. And when you drink on an empty stomach, well, we all know what happens after that. It's just a recipe for disaster. So eat a little something so that you're not famished.
And is it a smart idea at these events to bring up work, or should you steer clear of that subject?
Well, it depends. Etiquette is not black and white. It depends on the group. It depends on the situation. I would say that if you do talk about work, you want to make sure that it's not in the company of others that don't work for your company. For example, let's say that we all go to a company party and our spouses and partners are invited. If I start talking about business around your spouses or partners, they're probably going to get bored. And that doesn't do me any good, and it doesn't do you any good. So know your audience. And if you are going to talk about business, be brief. Just be brief, or save it for Monday. If somebody starts talking business with you, then you might want to say, John, that's a really interesting point, but can we just save it for Monday? Let's just have a good time tonight.
I know you also advise people to get practice with networking and mingling and that kind of thing by going to events, maybe even out of town, someplace where they're not really known or they don't really care, in order to practice their skills.
Well, that's a great way to practice your networking etiquette. I remember when I moved here, I live in Mount Dora, Florida, which is about an hour north of Orlando. And when I first moved here, no one knew me. So I would make a point to go out alone to events. It might be just like we have something cute called it's like a yappy hour. Yappy hour is for pet owners to get together, and you bring your dog and you have a glass of wine, and it's kind of like a little block party where people get together. And so I brought my dogs, and I didn't know anybody, but it was a great way for me to practice my networking skills on a neutral territory where no one knew me and I didn't have anything to lose. And it also helped me meet new people.
And on a totally different note, social media has made it so easy for people to show feelings that they wouldn't necessarily show if they were face-to-face with somebody. Is it always appropriate to follow the rule, if it's rude in person, it will still be rude on social media? Or are there exceptions to the rule when we can stand up for ourselves more behind the screens, I should say?
I think a lot of people hide behind the mask of social media, and they say things that they wouldn't ordinarily say to their peers or friends or family members. And I think that social media is a blessing. It's also a curse in that it has opened up a whole new world for us, but it has also exposed us to more negativity as well. And so I would be very cautious about what you put out there. I'll give you an example. I teach at a lot of colleges and universities. And the first thing that I do when I'm working with a student one-on-one to get them ready to make that transition from campus to career is I will check their social media pages. And the reason I do this is because employers do it. And I always say, you want to put yourself in the best light. So if you're out there on Instagram or Snapchat or Twitter or Facebook and you're doing something inappropriate, employers are going to see it as well. So you need to clean up your pages. You need to set your privacy settings really tight. And just remember that you have a personal brand online and in person.
And along those lines, what advice do you have in terms of setting up one's own personal brand in the workplace? Even if you're not the head of the company, you're just wanting to advance your career. How should you see yourself as a personal brand, and what should you do to make that as palatable, as successful as possible?
Our personal brands start when we're very young. In fact, our personal brand can start when we're adolescents. And a lot of people don't realize that. And we carry our personal brand with us every single day. As soon as we step out of our front door into the world, we're wearing our personal brand at all times. And people are judging us by the way that we treat other people. So, for example, if you're on a bus and someone takes your seat and you're getting ready to sit down, but somebody takes your seat and cuts in front of you, the first thing you're going to think is, gosh, that person is rude. So that person may not be rude. He or she may be in their own zone, or they may not even realize that they're doing that, but they have already made an impression on you. So you've already created an impression about this person just by the way he or she treated you. So it's important to be mindful of how you're going about your daily life. A lot of us just go through our daily life like a robot. We don't even really think about what we're doing. And that's not the way to live life. It's important to be more mindful of how we walk, how we talk, how we treat other people. And one of the things that I like to do, and I have to work on this every day, because I think people who teach etiquette, I have a joke, I need it the most because I've made every faux pas in the world. But what I like to do is when I go to the grocery store and I'm in the checkout line, I like to speak to the cashier who's checking out my groceries. I look at his or her name. I address them by name. I have a little chit chat. It might be something simple as, how is your day going? Or has it been busy today? Something simple. And just acknowledge that person, because you would be surprised how many people are not appreciated. They don't get acknowledged at all. And that little tiny gesture of kindness can make a huge difference in that person's day. So that's what I mean by enhancing your personal brand. If you want to enhance your personal brand, just be kinder to other people.
In this day and age, so many people use LinkedIn to connect with potential employers, and I feel like it's kind of not clear as to how we're supposed to approach these people on LinkedIn. And should we message them? Should we just view their profile? What's your advice for that?
LinkedIn is a great tool for people who are in business. However, I am seeing more and more people try to link up with other people for personal reasons, and it might be for dating reasons. LinkedIn is not a dating site.
No.
There are other sites that you can go to and subscribe to that will help you in that department. LinkedIn is strictly for networking with associates, with connecting, with referrals. It's a great place for you to post your resume or to give recommendations. And I use it for that. And I would recommend that you post a professional picture of yourself. Don't post your picture that was taken 20 years ago that you don't even look like, or don't wear the feather boa or the sequins. This is not glamour shots. It is a professional picture. And also make sure that your information is up to date. And if you're going to connect with someone, you might want to add a little message to that person and say, I would like to connect with you on LinkedIn because we met at such and such an event. So you're jogging their memory, and they are more likely to accept your invitation if you tell them how the two of you know each other or who you have in common.
Jacqueline, you have some thoughts on the types of handshakes people give when they're being introduced to one another or in other situations. Share that with us if you would.
There's one handshake that I like to teach my students, and that's the web to web. It's firm. It's not too long and lingering. In fact, it's 2 or 3 smooth pumps. But the main thing is it is a firm handshake. And by the way, men and women should shake hands the same way in the business arena, and men and women should stand for handshakes, because standing shows respect for the other person as well as yourself. I would discourage anyone from using the limp fish, the Terminator, or the two-handed handshake, unless, of course, you're a politician or you're in a religious arena. And I would also say stay away from what I call the fingerella, where you just give your fingertips.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I know. I can feel each one of those handshakes as you're describing them.
Right. And the fist bump. I just got a question the other day from a student who said, can I use the fist bump? I said, only with very close friends. It's not a business handshake.
Jacqueline Whitmore's website is etiquetteexpert.com. Next up on this episode, how to deal with overshopping during the holidays.
Our Nobody Told Me interview continues in just a moment. But first, we want to tell you about Hemp Fusion CBD products, which we love and think you will too.
Maybe you've heard about the potential benefits of CBD and are thinking about trying the product yourself. Well, you should know not all CBD is created equally. Hemp Fusion CBD is different.
Unlike other CBD brands who offer just CBD, Hemp Fusion is CBD plus omegas plus terpenes plus other natural ingredients to help you feel 100%. CBD works best for your body when combined with these other nutrients.
Our bodies already make cannabinoids, and plant-based CBD helps naturally balance our bodies. Hemp Fusion CBD adds in other natural ingredients to create products that help specifically with stress, sleep, and energy. I used Hemp Fusion CBD for stress today and was glad I did.
I'm an athlete and I'm obsessed with the mind and body balance capsules, which I take every day. I also love the sleep capsules. I used to take melatonin at night and hated how I would wake up feeling so groggy. With Hemp Fusion Sleep, I wake up feeling ready to tackle anything.
Everything they do adds up to a better product, and that adds up to a better day for you. Hemp Fusion, it all adds up.
Hemp Fusion is available both online and at a natural products retailer near you. There are no psychoactive effects, and it's legal in all 50 states, so it can be shipped anywhere in the U.S.
And we have a special offer for Nobody Told Me listeners who'd like to try Hemp Fusion CBD. Please use promo code NTM for 20% off of your first order and free shipping at hempfusion.com. That's promo code NTM.
Again, that's promo code NTM for 20% off of your first order and free shipping at hempfusion.com. As our Nobody Told Me holiday special continues, we look at the problem of compulsive shopping, which affects more than 18 million Americans. They're shopaholics, and the disorder can cause all kinds of problems in their lives, especially during the holiday shopping season. We talked about that with Dr. April Lane Benson, a nationally known psychologist who specializes in the treatment of compulsive buying disorder.
She's the author of To Buy or Not to Buy, Why We Overshop and How to Stop, along with I Shop, Therefore I Am, Compulsive Buying and the Search for Self. We asked Dr. Benson how you can tell if you have a problem with overshopping.
The way you would know would have to do with the consequences. It would have to do with how much time and energy you're spending shopping, how much time and energy you may be spending buying, and what negative consequences are accruing to you as a result. Are you having interpersonal problems with a spouse, a parent, a child? Are you feeling anxious, depressed, guilty? Are you racking up debt that you have no idea how you're going to repay? It has to do with consequences and the place in your life.
And you say that overshopping and overspending are misguided and ineffective attempts to meet emotional needs with material things. Tell us more about that.
We have many authentic underlying needs, all of us, the same ones. Beyond safety and security, we have the need for love and affection. We have the need to belong. We have the need for self-esteem. We have the need for the esteem of other people. And we also have the need to self-actualize. And shopping can be one way that people attempt to meet these underlying needs, but as I said, a misguided and ineffective way to meet them. Because you can never get enough of what you don't really need. And if what you really need is love and affection, that eighth pair of black boots isn't going to cut it.
Why is it that a shopping addiction is rarely taken seriously? And if anything, it seems like it's often part of a joke.
Yeah. This is really tragic. It's because consumption fuels our economy. Buying is the American way. I may have said this the first time I was on the show. We had a president after 9/11 who said we cannot let the terrorists frighten our nation to the point where people don't do business and people don't shop. Mrs. Bush and I want you to go shopping. He didn't say, Mrs. Bush and I want you to go drinking or drugging or gambling.
Interesting. Well, so we just are bombarded with these messages, especially during the holiday season. You can't turn on the television, you can't turn on the radio, you can't open your computer and surf the internet without just being bombarded with this holiday advertising. And I'm wondering what your patients tell you when you're meeting with them discussing their issues with overshopping. What do they tell you about how these ads impact them?
What they tell me is that the avalanche of what they're getting in their inbox tends to really reduce their willpower and make them less mindful as consumers. So one of the things that we try to do throughout the year is have them unsubscribe from some of the from the triggers, from the stores, store emails, the retail emails, the fashion boxes, the fashion blogs, whatever their particular triggers are, to work toward unsubscribing so that there is not so much availability. Because like with any substance, drug, behavior, accessibility, availability is a trigger. So if there's less to contend with, you're going to buy less.
But obviously, we can't avoid shopping entirely. So I'm curious to know how we can be smarter shoppers. If we're trying to improve our closet for work, for example, should we be looking for a good price, or should we really try to get quality pieces that we don't need to replace?
It all depends on what your individual situation is and how you want to present yourself. It's mindful shopping is what we're really after. And by that, I mean shopping that has us being able to answer these questions. Why am I here? Did I just have a fight with my boss and my all-purpose equal opportunity mood changer is shopping, so I got on the internet to buy? Why am I here? How do I feel? I feel really guilty because I left my dog in doggy daycare for much longer than I wanted him to be there. What am I trying to cover over, anesthetize myself against? Why am I here? How do I feel? Do I need this? What if I wait? How will I pay for it? Where will I put it? All of these are important questions to pose and to really take some time to answer, because most people know that once they get to, let's say, question 3 or 4, if it's a compulsive purchase, they don't even have to ask themselves 5 and 6 because they know it by then. Other people can go through all 6 questions and their answers are reasonable. And when that happens, it's very unlikely that the purchase is a compulsive one.
Is overshopping inherited? If your mother overshopped and had a real thing for shopping for bargains and a compulsive shopping issue, are you likely to have it?
I think that we do know that this runs in families. What runs more in families is a propensity toward addiction. It may not be the same addiction, but we certainly know that at least maybe 20% of first-order relatives, in 20% of the cases, there is a first-order relative with compulsive buying disorder. But in closer to 40%, there is a first-order relative with another addictive or behavioral issue.
Dr. Benson, you were quoted in this fascinating article saying that overshopping is really related to a feeling of control. And I hadn't heard that before. And I wondered if you could explain that a little bit more to our audience.
Let's imagine that somebody is married to a guy who is very controlling. I'm imagining someone that I've worked with. He wants the house cleaned up in a particular way, despite the fact that his wife works full time too. He wants things just so at the dinner table. He wants all the children's homework to be helped with, but he doesn't want to do it. And he is constantly looking at the bills and quizzing his wife. She feels so little control in her life. One of the things that makes her feel more in control is the fact that she has a desire to buy something. She goes out and buys it, and she brings it home. She has control over that purchase. Nobody's telling her right then and there not to do it. She may pay the piper later, but immediately it gives her a sense of efficacy and control.
Interesting. I have found in years past, as we get closer and closer to Christmas, that's the time that I feel more pressure about shopping. I'm asking myself, did I get enough? Is everybody treated equally in terms of the presents that I've bought? And there is that last minute pressure. And I do find that sometimes in the last 2 or 3 days before Christmas, I will go out and buy some extra things just to make sure that everybody's covered, that I feel I've done enough for everybody. Is that a common feeling?
I think it is a common feeling. And one of the ways to deal with that is to maybe rethink the whole gift-giving idea. We know there's an ample amount of research to suggest that when we use our discretionary income for ideas and experiences, travel, hobbies, personal development, some kind of event that we do with the recipient, we are much, much more satisfied than if we buy them another thing. And so are they, for many reasons. One being that experiences are something we do in a social context. So it's got the added benefit of the idea of love and affection being a part of it, and maybe belonging. Whereas if you give somebody a handbag, they wear it, they don't wear it, but you really have nothing to do with it. If what you give them is theater tickets with you or a long New Year's Day walk, it's a very different experience. These gifts are often much less expensive, but even if they're not, there's the anticipation, the time anticipating the event, the time having the event, and the memories. It lasts much longer. The whole cycle is much longer, and there's much more fulfillment.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I feel like a real trend among my millennial friends is buying experiences and booking travel. And I feel like a lot of these people feel like, oh, I'm buying an experience. I'm not buying a thing. I don't have a problem. But they're overindulging and they're living beyond their means by doing that. Do you think those kinds of people still have an over-shopping problem?
Sure. If you're living beyond your means, and if there are the kinds of negative consequences we talked about earlier in the program, definitely. You can overspend on experiences and ideas, to be sure.
You had a great piece of advice there a minute ago when you talked about gifting someone with a holiday or a New Year's Day walk with them as a present. What other advice do you have, suggestions do you have for people who can't afford to overshop this holiday season?
Spending time in the kitchen together, spending time making something, spending time volunteering together. There are lots of activities that we can do that cost little or nothing, that feed our souls and are feeding other people's souls.
How is compulsive buying different than hoarding? I saw you quoted saying that between a third and a half of compulsive shoppers actually have a hoarding issue as well.
Or they are on the way to becoming hoarders, because hoarding is something that tends to develop across the life cycle. We don't start as hoarders, but over time, if we continue with that kind of behavior, which is compulsive acquisition, without any kind of letting go, that starts to develop into a hoarding problem. And what we see is that the people who become hoarders tend to be more on the obsessive compulsive end. A lot of compulsion to do rather than it being the meeting of an impulse, which is more what compulsive buyers are, more impulsive usually than compulsive.
What problems are you seeing in January from people who've been over shopping in December?
People who are very depressed about the hot water they've gotten themselves into. People who hoped that the holiday was going to cheer them up, and instead it's made them feel worse. You know, how am I going to pay for this lavish Christmas that I had no business providing?
Our thanks to Dr. April Lane Benson, whose website is shopaholicnomore.com. I'm Laura Owens.
And I'm Jan Black.
And you're listening to Nobody Told Me. Thanks for joining us.